Ham-Radio 2026. Letztes Jahr war ich ja auch auf dem Flex-Stand und habe die Aura ein bisschen besprochen. Und heute gibt es was völlig Neues hier und dafür habe ich mir den George mal hier ins Interview geholt. Hey George, thank you for taking time.
Oh, thank you for coming by to see our stuff.
Yeah, okay, so a little bit to your person. Your call sign?
I'm KJ6VU, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been a ham since 1972,
Right.
long time. And I do a lot of portable operating, and I have a company called iShareRadio Systems, and we make antennas, we make control systems for remote stations, all kinds of things.
So, and lately, I don't know exactly, is it a recent thing or is it a long time going? You have a kind of a cooperation with Flex Radio?
Yeah, we've been working with Flex for a couple of years now. Okay. So we first started out looking at how we can extend the functionality of their stations for remote operating.
Okay.
So a lot of people use Flexes in their shack, but they want to either remote control their home station or they want to put a remote station somewhere else.
Right.
And Flex is a wonderful radio for that.
Yeah.
And so we looked at what it takes to do that, and we thought that there's an opportunity for us to make some additional things that could complement what they do. So what you see here as part of the Flex radio booth is a combination of our hardware and software products. What we started out with was announcing the station controller product a year ago. The station controller is a hardware solution that allows you to physically control and monitor the remote station. Because if you think about setting up a remote station, besides the radio and how you talk to the radio, right, you're concerned about how do I turn it on? How do I measure the temperature of the room or the temperature?
Turn around the beam.
How do I rotate the antenna? How do I change antennas? Yeah. What's my RF output power? There's many questions that you might have, especially if the station's not working right. So if something goes wrong, how do you know? If you're right there, you can look at it and see.
Right.
But if it's far away, you have no way to know if the station's working properly or not. So with the station controller, you can measure voltages, you can measure temperature, you can measure switch closures, there's relay controls. So this is a general purpose control module. This is the Raspberry Pi host adapter, which allows you to run Node-RED as the control surface. So this serves up a web page that you see over here, which is all of the knobs and buttons and switches that are controlled or monitored coming from the hardware.
So the hardware you're displaying here, is it an open system where you can choose your enclosure or you put it on a rail in a cabinet and something like that?
So the way we designed the hardware was to use industrial automation kind of installation techniques. And so in my opinion, the best way to do that is to use a DIN rail system, because with DIN rail system, you put in the base plate DIN rails, and then you could put in modules and mix and match. You can change things out. You can add third-party hardware. The wiring is much, much easier. If you put it all in a rack or in a cabinet, if you get it right the first time, that's great, but you're always going to make some changes. Absolutely, and it's very difficult. Yeah, so you could mount these in a 1U rack chassis or mount them in a box, but we prefer to mount them to a vertical wall on a DIN rail. Yeah. We offer many different modules, and you can mix and match different modules. Besides the general purpose I/O module here that we talked about, there's also an antenna relay module. This is a 4-port HF and 6-meter antenna relay. So you may have 1 radio to 4 antennas, or 4 radios to 1 antenna, or combine it together. This is good for over 100 watts. And if you want to go to a higher power switch, like a kilowatt switch, then you can buy a high power coax relay from our partners at DX Engineering. So they make high power 8-port switches.
I've seen that box on several locations. Yeah.
They're very, very popular. Yeah. And so what we do is we make the control module that connects directly to it. So you can integrate this mechanical manual switch into the rest of the automation station.
Right.
This is another example of a control module. This is an RF watt meter controller. We would have a directional coupler that connects to each of these 2 ports, and we can monitor the forward and reflected power, and different couplers are designed for different bands. So you can have an HF or a VHF or SHF coupler, and you can mix and match those together.
Okay, and then you've got a complete dashboard for all the stuff you're having the hardware set up.
That's right. So the way we provide the system, the Raspberry Pi module comes with an SD card and the Node-RED dashboard built in. So as a user, you don't really need to know how it's programmed. It just works. You literally take the Raspberry Pi module and a control module out of the box. You plug them together, you apply the network connection and power, and then within 1 minute, the IP address shows up on the display. You point your browser to that IP address, and now you have the whole control surface ready to go. So it's a complete out-of-the-box kind of a solution.
So can you transmit those sensor information about temperature and stuff with a LoRa system, with a mesh core?
You could do that also. Actually, there's two ways we do that. The way we interconnect the different modules, we use Ethernet cable.
Right.
But what's on the cable is not actually Ethernet. It's RS485. So there's 2 wires for data. And then just like PoE, we use 2 more pairs for power and ground. And that's 12-volt power. So one way to communicate between these is by cable.
I see, that's just one power supply feeds everything.
So we have one power supply coming in this one, and then here's the 12 volts coming in, power pole or barrel connector, and then data and power goes to all the modules. And you'll see every module has a 12 volt jack, so you can actually insert power on any of the modules and it shares them across all of them.
Right.
So the other thing you can do, you mentioned LoRa. Since this is serial data, we also offer data radios that allow you to connect to those same ports and transmit the data wirelessly. And in the US, we use 915 megahertz, and in Europe here we use 868. So we can supply 868 data radios, so you can bridge from the controller or any of these locally to a remote. So let's say, for example, you run one piece of coax out to your tower, and you want to switch one coax to 4 antennas. Then you could put this at the tower, and you can either run a cable or a data radio, and you can talk to it remotely.
So people, they're running their remote station on batteries. They might be interested in the standby power consumption.
Yes. Yeah, so power consumption, first off, you can leave the display on, or you can remove the displays and just run it without the display.
No way.
And it continues to run just fine.
And you can plug it hot?
I wouldn't hot plug it, no, but I'd hot unplug it.
Okay.
So if I take out the power and then I plug the display back in and I reconnect the power,
Well, this is a nice feature.
it'll boot up, and once it's done booting, which is now, then now I can control it.
All right. And of course you can control even without the display.
Oh yeah.
It's just to read out in person on site, but mostly you will you'll want to remove it to save power.
Yeah, and most of the time, if you have a big power system, you might just leave the displays on it. Yeah. But if you're battery operated, you can cut a little bit of power by removing it. Yeah. The modules themselves don't really take that much power. For example, the antenna switch module here uses latching relays, and we do that for 2 reasons.
Perfect.
Number 1, it takes no power. Number 2, if you lose power, it stays in the last position. Because the last thing you want to do if you lose power is disconnect all of your antennas. So if you pick antenna number 2 last time, we remove power, it's still connected to port 2.
Also in short, for our German viewers, bistabile Relais verbrauchen also keinen Strom, wenn sie ihre Position erreicht haben. Ist extrem vorteilhaft. Okay.
So that's the station controller. And the station controller you can use with any radio, with a Flex, ICOM, Elecraft. I have customers that use this system for industrial control applications, because as an industrial controller, it's actually very inexpensive. Hams will look at this like, well, okay, it costs some money. But for an industrial user, actually, these are very cheap.
Probably that's why the idea with the DIN rail was pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious. Yeah. So if you're used to industrial control, by the way, there's many aspects of the design that are really industrial application examples. So for instance, if I were to select an antenna here, like I select, let's say radio 1, you hear it click, and then a second later you see the little LED change color. What's happening is when I press the button, the second I press the button, it sends the command. The remote device decodes the command, does the operation, and then it sends an update back to the dashboard.
So you can really be sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you see the LED change color, changing color is because the module told it that it's really changed.
There.
Yeah. And that's just a very basic industrial control feature you would expect, right?
Yeah.
So we've implemented all that really in an amateur product. So that's the station controller. So that's our hardware solution. Then this year at Hamvention in the US, 1 month ago, we announced a software product called iShareRadio. And better put, it's not just software, it's actually a cloud-based service. So with a Flex radio, Flex is super popular for a remote station because it's just built to operate remote. So you can put the RF deck somewhere and your operator can be in another location and it works really well. When you do that with a Flex radio, you have a login ID to remotely access your radio. You have one login ID and one password. Well, if it's just your radio, that's fine and you're good. However, if you want to loan your radio's access to a friend...
I shared the personal account from friends of mine.
Right.
I know that problem.
And now take that to the next step. You have a club with 20 members, and you'd like to invite all 20 members to use your radio. You have many new challenges.
Yes.
One challenge is I don't want to share my credentials with everybody.
Exactly.
So we started this idea, we need a software product that takes SmartLink and goes to the next level. And that's what iShareRadio does. And we did this in development with Flex.
Okay.
So we approached Flex a couple of years ago. We told them what we wanted to do. They said, that would be great if you guys do it. We'll help you. And so we've had a very tight collaboration, and they've been wonderful to work with.
So it's a user management, maybe monitoring of users, what they actually are doing there.
So it's multiple things.
And does it have like a timer where every user can have a limit of time usage?
Yes.
Stuff like this?
Yes, and you can see all the details on our website, but basically there's 5 big features that are supported with iShareRadio. Number one is multiple user account management. Right. So all 20 members of my club will have their own login ID.
Right.
Now, since every member has a login ID, I know, for example, what class of license they have.
Right.
So I can now control the radio.
Perfect.
And make sure that you do not transmit outside of your bands based on your license class.
Brilliant.
So that's the first basic step. The second thing is we have a station reservation system. It's basically a calendar where you can go in and reserve time.
I can book my slot.
You book your slot.
Yeah.
And if you are at the end of your time and nobody's signed up after you, it'll just continue.
Oh, okay.
Or if somebody's time is next, then you'll be disconnected and the next person can connect.
Is that a warning period?
Oh yeah,
okay.
You get a warning, and if the other person doesn't sign in, you can extend your time.
Okay, but you can end your QSO.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
I can end early and make it available for somebody else.
All right.
The third thing that we do is what we call radio system administration. What that means is that our cloud server talks to your Flex radio, and we monitor what the radio is doing. This is how we know where you're trying to transmit or how much power. So as the owner of the radio, I can set all of the constraints. What bands can you operate? How much power? Where can you transmit? Are you receive
and
only?
I got statistics for the usage.
Exactly. So the first thing we do is we monitor the radio real time, and if the user makes any changes that violate the owner's rules, we change it back. The second thing we do is we log everything the user does.
Do you actually monitoring the SSB audio, for instance? No, that would go too far.
Well, it might be useful, but we haven't seen that as a use case yet. So, but we monitor, for example, when the user transmits, how much power they transmit with, what frequency they're on, what mode they're using, and all that is logged. It's mainly logged because if at some point the owner wants to know what happened if there is a problem, they can go back and see what happened.
Maybe something on an extended use, there might be some heat issues.
Yes.
And I can figure out when
exactly.
does it happen.
And if the user, let's say, has a problem, and they tell the owner, hey, I tried to use the radio and it didn't work, the user or the owner can say, well, let me go look at the log.
Okay.
And I'll see what you were trying to do and see what the problem
but
is.
everything goes through a cloud server, which is run by your company?
So some things do. So the only thing that goes through us is the authentication, the SmartLink credential authentication, and then we monitor what the radio does. The actual traffic of the signal information, the waterfall, the spectral display, all of that goes from the radio directly to the user.
Okay.
That does not go through us.
Okay.
And the reason is we have no need for it, and we don't want to add latency to that data.
Right.
Or a dependency on our system.
So is it a subscription-based model, or
yes.
What can you expect?
It is. And on our website you can see how it works. So if I go up here to...
So do you pay as you go, or is it a...
it's easy just to explain. So there, you can think about two kinds of accounts. There's a user and there's a host. The user, the person that will use the radio, can sign up for an account for free. There's no cost. the way that we get paid is that the owner of the radio signs up as a host.
The club manager.
The club manager.
Yeah.
So in depending on how many users and how many radios, we have a sliding scale that starts at about $100 US per year, and that allows 3 users and 1 radio. The next step, which is a typical club, is what we call our standard package. That's good for multiple radios and 25 users, and that's $150 a year.
And it's no problem to collect some pennies from the members then.
Right. In fact, you can do that 2 ways. You can go to your membership and say, please donate some money and then we'll pay for it as a club.
Yeah.
The other option we have is we also have a commercial marketplace. So as the owner of the radio, you can also choose to list your radio for rent on our marketplace.
Okay.
And you define what features, you define when it's available. You can set it up
I
and
think
make it available.
commercial based remote stations. I think that's not allowed in Germany.
Yeah, I don't know.
You can make a business model with it. It's not.
Yeah, you could do it in the U.S. no problem.
You have to do it just on some donations. That's it.
And that's the use case we really expect most of the time. So our target for this was a typical club that has a couple of dozen users that might want to use the club station. And these days, very few people go to the physical club station, and many clubs don't even have a club station.
Right.
But they usually have some member in the club who's willing to host the radio somewhere where there's a nice quiet space and maybe there's a good internet connection.
Right.
And then now you can easily remote your station and have all the control you want.
George, thank you so much for the explanations.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming by.
It's pretty interesting, pretty neat, pretty clever. And as always, I put all information down the video and people can check out.
Awesome.
Is it on market? Is it available?
Yes, it is. We released it. The hardware was released last year, and the iShareRadio software is in production as of last month.
So what's our German or European retailer then?
There isn't one right now.
Oh, okay.
So right now you can either buy through our web. So iShareRadio is strictly purchased off the web.
Yeah.
So you go to iShareRadio.com to buy the service. The hardware, we sell it directly, but we have a reseller in the U.S., which is DX Engineering, and they stock all of our stuff, and so that's the best place to buy it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk.